Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to According to Wikipedia with your host, Bang and Dang, and on to a long Wikipedia page all about the Napoleonic Wars. And I'm not kidding you guys when I'm saying this is going to be upwards of 3 hours of content, whether it be 1 part, 2 parts, or 3 parts, but the whole thing's going to be about 3 hours. So
Great.
This is, there's like 30 wars in between. Well, all in here, mixed in, because Napoleon went crazy. Yeah, before we get started, if you're listening on podcasts, give us a review, rate, and share it wherever you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcast apps. Or if you're listening on YouTube on this one, give us a subscription, click that bell, and turn on those notifications, which is clicking the bell. So,
Well, if it wasn't for Napoleon, the British might have won the War of 1812.
could have. We could be all Britons right now. Yeah, what a lot of stuff going on here. The Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815, series of conflicts fought between the First French Empire under Napoleon from 1804 to 1815, and a fluctuating array of European coalitions. The wars originated in political forces arising from the French Revolution from 1789 to 1799, and then the French Revolutionary Wars from 1792 to 1802. The War of the First which consisted of the War of the First Coalition from 1792 to 97, and the War of the Second Coalition from 98 to 1802, and then produced a period of French domination over continental Europe. There were 7 Napoleonic Wars, 5 named after the coalitions that fought Napoleon, plus 2 named for their respective theaters. First, War of the Third Coalition, 1803 to 1806. The second was the War of the Fourth Coalition from 1806 to 7. The third was the War of the Fifth Coalition in 1809. The fourth was the War of the Sixth Coalition from 1813 to 14. The fifth was the War of the Seventh Coalition in 1815. Sixth was the Peninsula War in 1807 to 14, and then the French invasion of Russia in 1812.
Man, they were busy years.
Yeah, they did a lot of stuff, man.
Oh, wow. Napoleon seized power in 1799, creating a military dictatorship. There are a number of opinions on the date to use as the formal beginning of the Napoleonic War. 18th of May, 1803 is often used, when Britain and France ended the only short period of peace between 1792 and 1814. The Napoleonic Wars began at the War of the Third Coalition, which was the first of the coalition wars against the First French Republic after Napoleon's accession as leader of the French.
Britain ended the Treaty of Amiens and declared war on France in May of 1803. Among the reasons were Napoleon's changes to the international system in Western Europe, especially in Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. Historian Frederick Kagan argues that Britain was irritated in particular by Napoleon's assertion of control over Switzerland.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Britons felt insulted when Napoleon stated that their country deserved no voice in European affairs, even though King George III was an elector of the Holy Roman Empire.
I'm sure he was.
For its part, Russia decided that the intervention in Switzerland indicated that Napoleon was not looking toward a peaceful resolution of his differences with other European powers.
I don't think he was.
Well, clearly not.
The British hastily enforced a naval blockade of France to starve it of resources. Napoleon responded with economic embargoes against Britain and sought to eliminate Britain's continental allies to break the coalition's arrayed against him. The so-called Continental System formed a league of armed neutrality to disrupt the blockade and force free trade with France. You must free trade with us, mofos. The British responded by capturing the Danish fleet, breaking up the league, and later secured dominance over the seas, allowing it to freely continue its strategy. Napoleon won the War of the Third Coalition at Austerlitz, forcing the Austrian Empire out of the war and formally dissolving the Holy Roman Empire.
Oh, shit. Well, within months, Prussia declared war as well, triggering a war of the Fourth Coalition. This war ended disastrously for Prussia, which was defeated and occupied within 19 days of the beginning of the campaign.
Yeah, Prussia was done.
Napoleon subsequently defeated Russia at Friedland and created a powerful client state in Eastern Europe and ended the Fourth Coalition. Concurrently, the refusal of Portugal to commit to the continental system and Spain's failure to maintain it led to the Peninsula War and the outbreak of the War of the Fifth Coalition. The French occupied Spain and formed a Spanish client kingdom, ending the alliance between the two. Heavy British involvement in the Iberian Peninsula soon followed, with the British effort to capture Antwerp failed. Jeez, dude.
Oh, you guys, these little sissy French boys come in and
I know.
do what they want with you. Napoleon oversaw the situation in Iberia, defeating the Spanish and expelling the British from the peninsula. Austria, keen to recover territory lost due to the War of the Third Coalition, invaded France's client states in Eastern Europe. Napoleon defeated the Fifth Coalition at Wagram. Plans to invade British North America pushed the United States to declare war on Britain in the War of 1812. But it did not become an ally of France, though. Grievances over control of Poland and Russia's withdrawal from the continental system led to Napoleon invading Russia in June of 1812. The invasion was an unmitigated disaster for Napoleon. Scorched earth tactics, desertion, French strategic failures, and the onset of the Russian winter. Yeah.
The Russian winter is undefeated in wars, dude. Holy
kidding.
shit.
This compelled Napoleon to retreat with massive losses. Yeah. That's like trying to go into Yukon territory.
Right. Well, Napoleon suffered further setbacks. French power in the Iberian Peninsula was broken at the Battle of Vittoria the following summer, and a new alliance began, the War of the Sixth Coalition. This coalition defeated Napoleon at Leipzig, precipitating his fall from power and eventual abdication of the throne on 6th of April, 1814. The victors exiled Napoleon to Elba and restored the Bourbon monarchy. Napoleon escaped from Elba in 1815, gathering enough support to overthrow the monarchy of Louis XVIII, triggering our seventh and final coalition against him, which that was the end.
No, but freaking Napoleon, man.
Right.
Napoleon was decisively defeated at Waterloo, and he was abdicated again on the 22nd of June. On 15th of July, he surrendered to the British at Rochefort and was permanently exiled to remote St. Helena. The Treaty of Paris, signed on 20th of November 1815, it formally ended the war. The Bourbon monarchy was restored once more, and the victors began the Congress of Vienna to restore peace to Europe. As a direct result of the war, the Kingdom of Prussia rose to become a great power, while Great Britain, with its unequaled royal navy and growing empire, became the world's dominant superpower, beginning the Pax Britannica.
It was a period of relative peace between the great powers.
He was a global policeman there before the United States became it. The Pax USA, yeah.
The Holy Roman Empire was dissolved, and the philosophy of nationalism that emerged early in the war contributed greatly to the later unification of the German states and those of the Italian peninsula. The war in Iberia greatly weakened Spanish power, and the Spanish Empire began to unravel.
Yeah, Spain has been saying
Spain would nearly lose all of its American possessions by 1833. Yeah. The Portuguese Empire shrank, with Brazil declaring independence in 1822. Wow.
And Brazil began to power. The wars revolutionized European warfare. The application of mass conscription and total war led to campaigns of unprecedented scale, as whole nations committed all their economic and industrial resources to a collective war effort.
So it was these wars that made it like military industrial.
It's kind of like the First World War, right?
Pretty much, right?
Tactically, the French army redefined the role of artillery, while Napoleon emphasized mobility to offset numerous disadvantages, and aerial surveillance was used for the first time in warfare. Little hot air balloons.
Probably.
The highly successful Spanish guerrillas demonstrated the capability of a people driven by fervent nationalism against an occupying force.
Well, due to the longevity of the wars, the extent of Napoleon's conquests, and the popularity of the ideals of the French Revolution, the period had a deep impact on European social culture. Many subsequent revolutions, such as that of Russia, looked to the French as their source of inspiration, while its core founding tenets greatly expanded the arena of human rights and shaped modern political philosophies in use today.
Oh, look at that shit.
Well, we could have ended it right there because it just said everything that happened. But now we're going to go in depth on every single coalition war.
Oh, no. The outbreak of the French Revolution had been received with great alarm by the rulers of Europe's continental powers, which had been further exacerbated by the execution of Louis XVI of France and the overthrow of the French monarchy. 1793, the Austrian Empire, the Kingdom of Sardinia, the Kingdom of Naples, Prussia, the Spanish Empire, and the Kingdom of Great Britain, they formed the first coalition to curtail the growing unrest in France. Measures such as mass conscription, military reforms, and total war allowed France to defeat the coalition, despite the Despite the concurrent civil war in France, though. Oh. Napoleon, then a general in the French army, he forced the Austrians to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, leaving only Great Britain opposed to the fledgling French Revolution, or French Republic.
Well, a second coalition was then formed in 1798 by Great Britain, Austria, Naples, and the Ottoman Empire, the Papal States, Portugal, Russia, and Sweden.
Ottoman Empire, that is...
Turkey.
Yeah.
The French Republic under the Directory suffered from heavy levels of corruption and internal strife. The new republic also lacked funds and no longer enjoyed the services of Lazare Carnat, who was the Minister of War who had guided France to its victories during the early stages of the revolution. Oh, so this is how Napoleon's going to come up, huh?
Right. Bonaparte, commander of the Armée d'Italie. Italy?
Why? He's French.
Bonaparte, commander of the Armée d'Italie, in the latter stages of the First Coalition, had launched a campaign in Egypt, intending to disrupt the British economic powerhouse of India. Pressed from all sides, the Republic suffered a string of successive defeats against revitalized enemies, supported by Britain's financial help.
Well, Napoleon then returned to France from Egypt on 23rd of August, 1799, his campaign there having failed. He seized control of the French government on 9th of November. He was like, I'll just take my own. And a bloodless coup d'etat, replacing Directory with the consulate and transforming the Republic into a de facto dictatorship. He further reorganized the French military forces, establishing a large reserve army positioned to support campaigns on the Rhine or in Italy.
Yeah, shit. Russia had already been knocked out of the war, and under Napoleon's leadership, the French decisively defeated the Austrians in June of 1800. Crippling Austrian capabilities in Italy. Austria was definitively defeated that December by Moreau's forces in Bavaria. The Austrian defeat was sealed by the Treaty of Luneville early the following year, further compelling the British to sign the Treaty of Amiens with France, establishing a tenuous peace.
Well, like we said, no consensus exists as to when the French Revolutionary War ended and the Napoleonic Wars began. Possible dates include 9th of November 1799, when Napoleon seized power, or the date according to the Republican calendar then in use, May 18th, 1803, when Britain and France ended the one short period of peace between 1792 and 1814, or it even could have been December 2nd, 1804, when Napoleon crowned himself emperor.
All right.
British historians occasionally refer to the nearly continuous period of warfare from 92 to 1815 as the Great French War, or as the final phase of the Anglo-French Second Hundred Years' War, spanning the period from 1689 to 1815. That's more than 100 years.
Right.
Historian Mike Rappert, in 2013, suggested using the term French Wars to unambiguously describe the entire period from 92 to 1815, obviously.
Right. Jeez.
Or the Napoleonic Wars. Clearly.
Right. In France, Napoleonic Wars are generally integrated with the French Revolutionary Wars. German historiography may count the War of the Second Coalition, during which Napoleon seized power, as the Erster Napoleonscher Krieg, the First Napoleonic War. Okay. In Dutch history, it is common to refer to the 7 major wars between 1792 and 1815 as the Coalition Wars, referring to the first 2 as the French Revolution Wars.
Okay. They're wars, okay? All right, moving on to Napoleon's tactics. He was and remains famous for his battlefield victories, and historians have spent enormous attention in analyzing them.
Right.
2008, Donald Sutherland, the actor, huh? Yeah. He wrote, the ideal Napoleonic battle was to manipulate the enemy into an unfavorable position through maneuver and deception, force him to commit his main forces and reserve to the main battle, and then undertake an enveloping attack with uncommitted or reserve troops on the flank or rear. Mm-hmm. Such a surprise attack would either produce a devastating effect on morale or force them to weaken his main battle line. Either way, the enemy's own impulsiveness began the process by which even a smaller French army could defeat the enemy's forces one by one.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Kind of what Lee did.
Kind of. We tried.
Well, right.
After 1807, Napoleon's creation of a highly mobile, well-armed artillery force gave artillery uses increased tactical importance. Napoleon, rather than relying on infantry to wear away the enemy's defenses, could now use massed artillery as a spearhead to pound a break in the enemy's line, just as the Union is doing right now in our battles of the American Civil War. Once that was achieved, he sent infantry in and the cavalry.
Of course. Britain was irritated by several French actions following the Treaty of Amiens. Bonaparte had annexed Piedmont and Elba.
Is Bonaparte Napoleon?
Yes.
His name is Bonaparte Napoleon?
No, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Whatever.
Napoleon had annexed Piedmont and Elba, made himself president of the Italian Republic, a state in northern Italy that France had set up, and failed to evacuate Holland as it had to agree to in the treaty. France continued to interfere with British trade despite peace having been made, and complained that Britain harboring certain individuals and not cracking down on the anti-French press.
Okay.
So they want to get rid of the Britons.
Malta had been captured by Britain during the war and was subject to a complex arrangement in the 10th article of the Treaty of Amiens, where it was to be restored to the Knights of St. John with a Neapolitan garrison and placed under the guarantee of third powers. The weakening of the Knights of St. John by the confiscation of their assets in France and Spain, along with delays in obtaining guarantees, prevented the British from evacuating, and after 3 months, as stipulated in the treaty.
So they're all breaking the treaty.
Right.
The Helvetic Republic had been set up by France when it invaded Switzerland in 1798. France had withdrawn its troops, but violent strife broke out against the government, which many Swiss saw as overly centralized.
Right.
Bonaparte reoccupied the country in October 1802 and imposed a compromise settlement. This caused widespread outrage in Britain, which protested that this was a violation of the Treaty of Luneville, or whatever. Although continental powers were unprepared to act, the British decided to send an agent to help the Swiss obtain supplies, and also ordered their military not to return Cape Colony to Holland as they had committed to do in the Treaty of Amiens.
Oh, so might as well even signed it.
Right.
Jeez. Well, the Swiss resistance collapsed before anything could be accomplished. After a month, Britain countermanded the orders not to restore Cape Colony. At the very same time, Russia finally joined the guarantee with regard to Malta. Concerned that there would be hostilities when Napoleon found out that Cape Colony had been retained, the British began to procrastinate on the evacuation of Malta. January of 1803, a government paper in France published a report from a commercial agent which noted the ease in which Egypt could be conquered. Like, Egypt's easily conquered, guys. The British seized on this to demand satisfaction and security before evacuating Malta, which was a convenient stepping stone to Egypt.
Right. Well, France disclaimed any desire to seize Egypt and asked what sort of satisfaction was required, but the British were unable to give a response. There was still no thought of going to war. Prime Minister Addington publicly affirmed that Britain was in a state of peace. Early March 1803, the Addington ministry received word that Cape Colony had been reoccupied by the British Army in accordance with the orders which had subsequently been countermanded. 8th of March, they ordered military preparations to guard against possible French retaliation and justified them by falsely claiming that it was only in response to French preparations and that they were conducting serious negotiations with France.
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
Yeah.
In a few days, it was known that Cape Colony had been surrendered in accordance with the counter orders. But it was too late. Napoleon berated the British ambassador in front of 200 spectators over the military preparations. The Addington ministry realized they would face an inquiry over their false reasons for the military preparations. And during April, they unsuccessfully attempted to secure the support of William Pitt the Younger to shield them from damage. He's like, I can't do it. In the same month, the ministry issued an ultimatum to France, demanding the retention of Malta for at least 10 years, the permanent acquisition of the island of Lampedusa from the Kingdom of Sicily, and the evacuation of Holland.
They also offered to recognize French gains in Italy if they evacuated Switzerland, and French getting them gains, man.
Like, dude, you guys can keep what you got in Italy. Just give us back the Swiss.
And they and compensated the King of Sardinia for his territorial losses.
Ooh, see that they're willing probably to give back the land of Switzerland, but not compensate the king. Sorry.
Well, France offered to place Malta in the hands of Russia to satisfy British concerns, pull out of Holland when Malta was evacuated, and form a convention to give satisfaction to Britain on other issues. The British falsely denied that Russia had made an offer, and their ambassador left Paris. Oh, wow. Desperate to avoid war, Bonaparte sent a secret offer where he agreed to let Britain retain Malta if France could occupy the Otranto Peninsula in Naples. Dude, look at these guys. These two countries are just like countries that have nothing to do with them. They're like, well, what if we just give you this country? And
what if I give you St. James and Madison Avenue for Park Place?
Hell, dude.
Park? No, just what?
You don't even own Park Place. All efforts were futile, and Britain declared war on the 18th of May, 1803.
Oh, my, oh, my, oh, my. Okay, so look at this here. Britain ended the uneasy truce created by the Treaty of Amiens when it declared war on France in May of 1803.
Yes.
The British were increasingly angered by Napoleon's reordering of the international system in Western Europe, especially in Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and Netherlands. Kagan argues that Britain was especially alarmed by Napoleon's assertion of control over Switzerland. He wanted Switzerland for some reason. The British felt insulted when Napoleon said it deserved no voice in European affairs, even though King George was an elector of the Holy Roman Empire.
We already said this, guys.
And that they sought to restrict the London newspapers that were vilifying him.
All right. Well, Britain had a sense of loss of control as well as loss of markets and was worried by Napoleon's possible threat to its overseas colonies. McLynn, whoever that is, historian, I guess, argues that Britain went to war in 1803 out of a mixture of economic motives and national neurosis, and irrational anxiety about Napoleon's motives and intentions. McLynn concludes that it proved to be the right choice for Britain because, in the long run, Napoleon's intentions were hostile to the British national interest. Right. Napoleon was not ready for war, and so this was the best time for Britain to stop them.
Right.
Britain seized upon the Malta issue, refusing to follow the terms of the Treaty of Amiens and evacuate the island.
Which we heard. The deeper the British grievance was, the perception that Napoleon was taking control of Europe. Personal control. Making the international system unstable and forcing Britain to the sidelines.
Oh, can't have that.
Numerous scholars have argued that Napoleon's aggressive posture made him enemies and cost him potential allies. As late as 1808, the Continental powers affirmed most of his gains and titles, but the continuing conflict with Britain led him to start the Peninsular War and the invasion of Russia, which many scholars see as a dramatic miscalculation. Yeah, he shouldn't have done anything with Russia.
Right. There was one serious attempt to negotiate peace with France during the war made by Charles James Fox in 1806. The British wanted to retain their overseas conquests and have Hanover restored to George III in exchange for accepting French conquests on the continent. The French were willing to cede Malta, Cape Colony, Tobago, and French Indian posts to Britain, but wanted to obtain Sicily in exchange for the restoration of Hanover, a condition the British refused. Oh my gosh.
Wow. Unlike its many coalition partners, Britain remained at war throughout the period of the Napoleonic Wars. Protected by naval supremacy, in the words of Admiral Jarvis to the House of Lords, "I do not say, my lords, that the French will not come. I say only they will not come by sea."
Right. Ain't nobody doing nothing to the British fleets.
No, hell no. Right. Britain did not have to spend, well, maybe Spain.
Yeah.
Britain did not have time to spend the entire war defending itself and could therefore focus on supporting its embattled allies, maintaining low-intensity land warfare on a global scale for over a decade. Well, that's cool. The British government paid out large sums of money to other European states so that they could pay armies in the field against France.
Look at that. These payments are colloquially known as the Golden Cavalry of St. George. The British Army provided long-term support to the Spanish rebellion in the Peninsular War of 1808 to 1814, assisted by Spanish guerrilla tactics, which was little war tactics. Anglo-Portuguese forces under Arthur Wellesley supported the Spanish, which campaigned successfully against the French armies, eventually driving them from Spain and allowing Britain to invade southern France.
Okay.
By 1815, the British Army played the central role in the final defeat at Waterloo.
Oh. Well, what did it do to the economy? Well, in response to naval blockade of the French coast enacted by the British government on the 16th of May, 1806, Napoleon issued the Berlin Decree on the 21st of November, 1806, which brought into effect the Continental System. This policy aimed to eliminate the threat from Britain by closing French-controlled territory to its trade. Britain maintained a standing army of 220,000 at the height of the Napoleonic Wars. Damn. Of whom less than half were available for campaigning. Well,
Okay.
the rest were necessary for garrisoning Ireland and the colonies and providing security for Britain.
Yeah, they were like, we need to put some people over in Ireland because they see all this happening. They're gonna rise up. We can't have that.
Meanwhile, look at France. Jeez.
France's strength peaked at around 2.5 million full-time and part-time soldiers, including several 100,000 National Guardsmen whom Napoleon could draft into the military if necessary. Both nations enlisted
I don't
large
even think the U.S. Army has 2 million.
right now.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's only
No, they have a few million.
maybe.
There's a YouTube video out there that shows military sizes.
Yeah. China has what?
A lot.
1 billion?
Not a billion military, no.
At least. They got what? 6 billion people? And there's only 8 billion on Earth?
They got 2 billion. India has 2 billion. There's 2 countries, half of the world's population. Stupid. And India has a nuclear power as well. So France's strength peaked at 2.5 million full-time and part-time soldiers, included several hundred thousand National Guardsmen whom Napoleon could draft if he wanted. Both nations enlisted large numbers of sedentary militia who were unsuited for campaigning and were mostly employed to release regular forces for active duty.
Of course.
The Royal Navy disrupted France's extra-continental trade by seizing and threatening French shipping and colonial possessions, but could do nothing about France's trade with the major continental economies and posed little threat to French territory in Europe.
I mean, yeah, you really couldn't. Like I said, Britain don't have no power on land.
Right.
France's population and agricultural capacity far outstripped that of Britain. Britain had the greatest industrial capacity in Europe, and its mastery of the seas allowed it to build up considerable economic strength through trade. This ensured that France could never, ever consolidate its control over Europe in peace. Many in the French government believed that cutting Britain off from the continent would end its economic influence over Europe and isolate it. I mean, it's possible.
What? Well, how they financed the war. A key element in the British success was its ability to mobilize the nation's industrial and financial resources and apply them to defeating France. Although the UK had a population of approximately 16 million against France's 30 million, the French numerical advantage was offset by British subsidies that paid for many of the Austrian and Russian soldiers, peaking at about 450,000 men in 1813. Under the Anglo-Russian Agreement of 1803, Britain paid a subsidy of 1.5 million pounds for every 100,000 Russian soldiers in the field.
Damn.
Wow.
British national output remained strong, and the well-organized business sector channeled products into what the military needed. Britain used its economic power to expand the Royal Navy. And they doubled the number of frigates, adding 50% more large ships of the line, and increasing the number of sailors from 15 to 133,000 in 8 years after the war began in 1793.
Damn.
France saw its navy shrink by more than half. The smuggling of finished products into the continent undermined French efforts to weaken the British economy by cutting off markets. People are going to stop buying that British goods.
Right. Subsidies to Russia and Austria kept them in the war as well. The British budget in 1814 reached 98 million pounds, including 10 million for the Royal Navy, 40 million for the Army, 10 million for the Allies, and 38 million as interest on the national debt, which soared to 679 million pounds. That's not even nowhere near. What, pounds, though, back then? How much were they? I don't know.
I'm sure that was leading money.
More than double the GDP, which that says 679 million was. This debt was supported by hundreds of thousands of investors and taxpayers despite the higher taxes on land and a new income tax. The cost of the war, that's fucking British love their tax. Cost of the war came to 831 million pounds. In contrast, the French financial system was inadequate and Napoleon's forces had to rely in part on requisitions from conquered lands.
Damn right. From London in 1813 to 1815, Nathan Mayer Rothschild was instrumental in almost single-handedly financing the British war effort, as are the Rothschilds today. Organizing the shipment of bullion to the Duke of Wellington's army across Europe, as well as arranging the payment of British financial subsidies to their continental allies.
Okay, well, moving on to the War of the Third Coalition, which is after the French Revolution, I guess the official start of, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Britain gathered together allies to form the Third Coalition against the French Empire after Napoleon self-proclaimed as emperor. In response, Napoleon seriously considered an invasion of Great Britain.
He should have.
And massed 180,000 troops at Boulogne. I think it's called Boulogne, right? Boulogne. Before he could invade, he needed to achieve naval superiority, or at least pull the British fleet away from the English Channel. Yeah, I mean, you're not getting into the English Channel, guys. A complex plan to distract the British by threatening their possessions in the West Indies, failed when a Franco-Spanish fleet under Admiral Villeneuve turned back after an indecisive action at Cape Finisterre on July 22nd, 1805. Oh, what a pussy.
Right. The Royal Navy blockaded Villeneuve and Cadiz until he left for Naples on 19th October, 1805. The British squadron caught and overwhelmingly defeated the combined enemy fleet in the Battle of Trafalgar. The British squadron caught and overwhelmingly defeated the combined enemy fleet in the Battle of Trafalgar on the 21st of October. The British commander, Lord Nelson.
Oh, not Lord Nelson.
Died in this battle.
Oh, no.
Napoleon never again had the opportunity to challenge the British at sea. nor to threaten an invasion.
Yeah.
He again turned his attention to the enemies on the continent. Yeah, he's like, all right, we'll just keep on going towards these little fellas.
In April 1805, British and Russians signed a treaty with the aim of removing the French from the Botvian Republic, roughly present-day Netherlands, and the Swiss Confederation. What is up with this? The Scandinavian places. Right. Austria joined the alliance after the annexation of Genoa and the proclamation of Napoleon as King of Italy on the 17th of March, 1805. Sweden, which had already agreed to lease Swedish Pomerania as a military base for British troops against France, entered that coalition on August 9th themselves.
Well, I bet they did. The Austrians began the war by invading Bavaria on the 8th of September, 1805.
Bavaria, isn't that Germany? They got control of Germany, too? Oh, the Kingdom of Bavaria. Well, yeah, they eventually got into Germany. So, damn, dude, how much stuff does French own right now?
It's a lot. The Austrians began war by invading Bavaria on the 8th of September, 1805, with an army of about 70,000 under Karl Marx von Lieberich. And the French army marched out from Boulogne in late July of 1805 to confront them. At Ulm, Napoleon surrounded Max's army, which is between the 25th September and the 20th of October, and it forced Max's army to surrender without significant losses. With the main Austrian army north of the Alps defeated, which was another army under Archduke Charles that was fought against André Massina's French army in Italy, Napoleon occupied Vienna on the 13th of November. Far from his supply lines, he faced a larger Austro-Russian, they call them Austros, that's cool.
Austros.
Austro-Russian army under the command of Mikhail Kutuzov, with Emperor Alexander I of Russia personally present there.
Oh,
man, look at that shit. On the 2nd of December, Napoleon crushed the Austro-Russian force in Moravia at Austerlitz, usually considered his greatest victory.
Oh, good for him, huh?
He inflicted 25,000 casualties on a numerically superior enemy, while sustaining fewer than 7,000 in his own forces.
Oh. Austria signed the Treaty of Pressburg on December 26, 1805, and left the coalition. They said, I'm out. The treaty required the Austrians to give up Venetia to the French-dominated Kingdom of Italy and the Tyrol to Bavaria. With the withdrawal of Austria from the war, stalemate ensued. Napoleon's army had a record of continuous unbroken victories on land, but the full force of the Russian army had not yet come into play.
Of course not.
Napoleon had now consolidated his hold on France and taken control of Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and most of Western Germany and Northern Italy.
Damn.
Jeez, dude. It's freaking Hitler.
All right. His admirers say that Napoleon wanted to stop then, but was forced to continue in order to gain greater security from the countries that refused to accept his conquest. Estelle rejects the explanation and instead says that it was a good time to stop expansion, for the major powers were ready to accept Napoleon.
Right, he could have just left and all right, I guess we'll do what we do.
We'll do with them later. Let them be there for a while. In 1806, both Russia and Britain had been positively eager to make peace, and they might have agreed to the terms that would have left the Napoleonic Imperium almost completely intact.
Wow.
As for Austria and Prussia, they simply wanted to be left alone.
They're like, dude, just leave us alone.
To have secured a compromise peace would have been comparatively easy. But Napoleon was prepared to make no concessions.
Yeah, he got a little bit too big for his britches.
He knew they were going to come after him sooner or later.
Right. Within months of the collapse of the Third Coalition, the Fourth Coalition rose up against France and was formed by Britain, Prussia, Russia, Saxony, and Sweden. July 1806, Napoleon formed the Confederation of Rhine out of the many tiny German states that constituted the Rhineland and most other western parts of Germany. He amalgamated many of the smaller states into larger electorates, duchies, and kingdoms to make the governments of non-Prussian Germany smoother.
Hey.
Napoleon elevated the rulers of the two largest Confederation states, Saxony and Bavaria, to the statuses of kings.
Fantastic.
Look at that.
You got to.
These guys are like, hell yeah, I'm with you.
And make these guys feel like they got a say in something. Right. August 1806, the Prussian king, Frederick William III, decided to go to war independently of any...
Oh, so he didn't even want to join the coalition. He said, we'll go by ourselves, baby.
Right, yeah. He decided to go independently of any other greater power on his side. The army of Russia, a Prussian ally in particular, was too far away to assist anyhow. October 8th, 1806, Napoleon unleashed all of the French forces east of the Rhine into Prussia. Napoleon defeated a Prussian army at Jena, which is 14th of October in 1806, and Devout defeated another at Auerstadt on the same day. 160,000 French soldiers, increasing in number as the campaign went on, they attacked Prussia, moving with such speed that they destroyed the entire Prussian army as an effective military force.
Out of the 250,000 troops, the Prussians sustained 25,000 casualties, lost a further 150,000 as prisoners, 4,000 artillery pieces, and over 100,000 muskets. At Jena, Napoleon had fought only a detachment of the Prussian force, though. The battle at Auerstadt involved a single French corps defeating the bulk of the Prussian army. Wow. Napoleon entered Berlin on 27th October 1806. He visited the tomb of Frederick the Great and instructed his marshals to remove their hats there, saying, "If he were alive, we wouldn't be here today."
Hey.
Oh. Napoleon had taken only 19 days from beginning his attack on Prussia to knock it out of the war with the capture of Berlin and the destruction of its principal armies at Jena and Auerstadt. Saxony left Prussia and, together with small states from North Germany, allied with French. They're like, "Yep, gotta go with where the getting's good now."
You ain't kidding. In the next stage of the war, the French drove Russian forces out of Poland and employed many Polish and German soldiers in several sieges in Silesia and Pomerania, with the assistance of Dutch and Italian soldiers in the latter case. Napoleon then turned north to confront the remainder of the Russian army and try to capture the temporary Prussian capital at Königsberg. A tactical draw at Eylau on the 7th and 8th of February 1807, followed by capitulation at Danzig on the 24th of May 1807, and the Battle of Heilsberg at the 10th of June 1807, forced the Russians to withdraw further north. They're just getting pushed back.
France is just dominating right now.
Crazy.
Napoleon decisively beat the Russian army at Friedland, 14th of June 1807, following which Alexander had to make peace with Napoleon at Tilsit, which was July 7th, 1807. Germany and Poland, new Napoleonic client states such as the Kingdom of Westphalia, Duchy of Warsaw, and Republic of Danzig were established. By September, Marshal Guillaume Brune completed the occupation of Swedish Pomerania, allowing the Swedish army to withdraw all of its munitions of war.
Oh, look at that.
Okay.
Damn Swedes. Britain's first response to Napoleon's continental system was to launch a major naval attack against Denmark. Although ostensibly neutral, Denmark was under heavy French and Russian pressure to pledge its fleet to Napoleon. London could not take the chance of ignoring the Danish threat. August 1807, the Royal Navy besieged and bombarded Copenhagen, leading to the capture of the Dano-Norwegian fleet and assuring use of the sea lanes in the North and Baltic seas for the British merchant fleet. They're like, we got this shit.
Denmark joined the war on the side of France, but without a fleet, it had little to offer, beginning an engagement in a naval guerrilla war in which small gunboats attacking larger British ships in Danish and Norwegian waters. Denmark also committed themselves to participate in a war against Sweden together with France and Russia. Against Sweden with France and Russia? I thought Russia was against France. What the hell's going on there? At Tilsit, Napoleon and Alexander had agreed that Russia should force Sweden to join the continental system, which led to Russian invasion of Finland in February of 1808, followed by a Danish declaration of war in March. So now Russia's on freaking France? With France? What's going on there?
Napoleon also sent an auxiliary corps consisting of troops from France, Spain, and the Netherlands, led by Marshal Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte. He sent them to Denmark to participate in the invasion of Sweden. But British naval superiority prevented the armies from crossing the Øresund Strait, and the war came mainly to be fought along the Swedish-Norwegian border. At the Congress of Erfurt, September through October of 1808, France and Russia further agreed on the division of Sweden into two parts separated by the Gulf of Bothnia, where the eastern part became the Russian Grand Duchy of Finland.
British voluntary attempts to assist Sweden with humanitarian aid remained limited and did not prevent Sweden from adopting a more Napoleon-friendly policy. The war between Denmark and Britain effectively ended with the British victory at the Battle of Lingor in 1812, involving the destruction of the last large Dano-Norwegian ship, the frigate Najaden or something. Right.
No shit. 1807, Napoleon created a powerful outpost of his empire in Central Europe. Poland had recently been partitioned by its three large neighbors, but Napoleon created the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, which depended on France from the very beginning. The duchy consisted of lands seized by Austria and Prussia. Its Grand Duke was Napoleon's ally, the King of Saxony. But Napoleon appointed the intendants who ran the country.
Of course.
A population of 4.3 million was released from occupation, and by 1814 sent about 200,000 men to Napoleon's armies.
That included about 90,000 who marched with him to Moscow. Few marched back, though.
I bet.
The Russians strongly opposed any move towards an independent Poland, and one reason Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812 was to punish them. Said, oh yeah? The Grand Duchy was absorbed into Russian Empire as a semi-autonomous Tsardom of Poland in 1815, and Poland did not become a state again until 1918, following the dissolution of the Russian Empire.
Really?
Napoleon's impact on Poland was huge, including...
Poland wasn't even a country in the First World War?
Nope. It's part of Russia. Well, the USSR or whatever the hell it was back then.
Then Germany had Poland, or was that the Second World War?
Right. Right. Napoleon's impact on Poland was huge, including the Napoleonic legal code, which was the abolition of serfdom and the introduction of modern middle class bureaucracies.
We all know Britain like do that.
Well, that was Napoleon.
Yeah, but we all know. The Iberian conflict began when Portugal continued trade with Britain despite French's restrictions.
Well, now we're moving on to the Peninsula War part of this.
Fantastic.
You can go to the main... Dude, there's a main article on the Peninsula War. This is ridiculous.
The Iberian conflict began when Portugal continued trade with Britain despite French's restrictions.
Oh, don't do that, Iberia. I don't even know what that is, but what is Iberia?
When Spain failed to maintain the continental system, the uneasy Spanish alliance with France ended in all but name. French troops gradually encroached on the Spanish territory until they occupied Madrid, and they installed a client monarchy. This provoked an explosion of popular rebellions against Spain, across Spain. Heavy British involvement soon followed.
Because, of course, after defeats in Spain suffered by France, Napoleon took charge and enjoyed success, retaking Madrid, defeating the Spanish, and forcing a withdrawal of the heavily outnumbered British army from the Iberian Peninsula at the Battle of Corunna.
It's like 10-1, and he's just mutilating these guys.
But when he left, the guerrilla war against his forces in the countryside continued to tie down great numbers of troops. The outbreak of the War of the Fifth Coalition prevented Napoleon from successfully wrapping up operations against British forces by necessitating his departure for Austria, and he never returned to the Peninsular Theater.
Why would he? The British then sent a fresh army under Sir Arthur Wellesley, later the Duke of Wellington. For a time, the Briton and Portuguese remained restricted to the area around Lisbon, behind their impregnable lines of Torres Vedras, while their Spanish allies were besieged in Cadiz. It's a movie.
Besieged in Cadiz.
The Peninsular War proved a major disaster for France. Napoleon did well when he was in direct charge, but severe losses followed his departure, as he severely underestimated how much manpower would be needed. The effort in Spain was a drain on money, manpower, and prestige.
Historian David Gates called it the Spanish ulcer. Napoleon realized it had been a disaster for his cause, writing later, "That unfortunate war destroyed me. All the circumstances of my disasters are bound up in that fatal knot."
If he would just quit when he was supposed to.
Not done the Peninsular. Shit,
Right.
Get out of there. The Peninsular campaigns witnessed 60 major battles and 30 major sieges, more than any other of the Napoleonic conflicts, and lasted over 6 years, far longer than any of the others as well.
All right.
France and her allies lost at least 91,000 killed in action, 237,000 wounded in the peninsula alone.
Jeez.
From 1812, the Peninsular War merged with the War of the Sixth Coalition.
Had to, right?
But we're not even to the fifth one yet, which we are now.
Moving on to the Fifth Coalition. It happened in 1809, and it was Britain and Austria against France. And it was formed as Britain.
I thought Austria wanted to be left alone. Now they're going on another coalition?
No, this is formed as Britain is engaged in the Peninsular War in Spain and Portugal. The sea became a major theater of war against Napoleon's allies. Austria, previously an ally of France, took the opportunity to attempt to restore its imperial territories in Germany as held prior to Austerlitz. During the time of the Fifth Coalition, the Royal Navy won a succession of victories in the French colonies.
All right. On land, the major battles included the Battle of Rasen, the Battle of Ekmol, the Battle of Robb, the Battle of Aspern-Essling, and the Battle of Wagram. On land, the Fifth Coalition attempted few extensive military endeavors. One, the Walcheren Expedition of 1809, involved a dual effort by the British Army and Navy to relieve Austrian forces under intense French pressure. It ended in disaster after the Army commander John Pitt, 2nd Earl of Chatham, failed to capture the objective and the naval bases of French-controlled Antwerp.
Uh-oh.
Ooh, can't do that, guy.
Right.
You guys you're Navy. How are you failing to get a naval base?
Crazy. For the most part of the years of the Fifth Coalition, British military
It
operations.
was only 1 year.
Right.
I mean, years.
British military operations on land, apart from the Iberian Peninsula, remain restricted to hit-and-run operations executed by the Royal Navy, which they dominated the sea after having beaten down almost all substantial naval opposition from France and its allies, and they also blockaded what remained of the France's naval forces in heavily fortified French-controlled ports. These rapid attack operations were aimed mostly at destroying blockaded French naval and mercantile shipping, and the disruption of French supplies, communications, and military units stationed near the coast.
Yeah.
Anything by the coast, we're getting.
Often when British allies attempted military actions within several dozen miles or so of the sea, the Royal Navy would arrive, land troops and supplies, and aid the coalition's land forces in a concerted operation. Royal Navy ships even provided artillery support against French's units when fighting strayed enough near the coastline. The ability and quality of land forces govern these operations. For example, when operating with inexperienced guerrilla forces in Spain, the Royal Navy sometimes failed to achieve its objectives because of the lack of manpower that the Navy's guerrilla allies had promised to supply.
Right.
Of course. That's what you get for relying on guerrillas.
That's true. Austria achieved some initial victories against the thinly spread army of Marshal Berthier. Napoleon had left Berthier with only 170,000 men to defend France's entire eastern frontier.
Holy shit.
Well, in the 1790s, 800,000 men had carried out the same tasks, but holding a much shorter front. In the east, the Austrians drove into the Duchy of Warsaw, but suffered defeat at the Battle of Razin on the 19th of April, 1809. The Polish army captured West Galicia following its earlier success. Napoleon assumed personal command and bolstered the army for a counterattack on Austria.
He's like, I got this, boys.
Right.
After a few small battles, the well-run campaign forced the Austrians to withdraw from Bavaria, and Napoleon advanced into Austria. His hurried attempt to cross the Danube River, I'm assuming, resulted in the major battle of Aspern-Essling on May 22nd, 1809. Napoleon's first significant tactical defeat. But the Austrian commander, Archduke Charles, failed to follow up on his indecisive victory, allowing Napoleon to prepare and seize Vienna in early July.
Yep.
He defeated the Austrians at Wagram on the 5th and 6th of July. It was during the middle of that battle that Marshal Bernadotte was stripped of his command after retreating contrary to Napoleon's orders.
Oh.
You don't do that, guy.
Look, you lived.
Lived.
Right. Shortly thereafter, Bernadotte, he took up the offer from Sweden to fill the vacant position of Crown Prince.
Holy shit.
Later, he actively participated in wars against his former emperor.
Damn. This guy.
Right.
What the hell happened to this guy? I bet he got killed.
The War of the Fifth Coalition ended with the Treaty of Schönbrunn on October 14th, 1809. In the east, only the Tyrolese rebels, led by Andres Hofer, continued to fight the French Bavarian army until finally defeated in November of 1809. In the west, the Peninsular War continued. Economic warfare between Britain and France also continued. The British continued a naval blockade of French-controlled territory as well.
Due to the military shortages and lack of organization in French territory, many breaches of the continental system occurred, and the French continental system was largely ineffective and did little economic damage to Great Britain.
Of course.
Both sides entered further conflicts in attempts to enforce their blockade. As Napoleon realized that extensive trade was going through Spain and Russia, he invaded those two countries.
Good luck.
The British fought the United States in the War of 1812
It lasted for 3 years.
at the same time.
Almost captured the United States.
Yeah, 1810, the French Empire reached its greatest extent. Napoleon married Marie Louise, an Austrian archduchess, really, with the aim of ensuring a more stable alliance with Austria and providing the... Damn, she was probably a traitor to her people. Well, and of providing the empire with an heir, something his first wife, Josephine, had failed to do.
Oh.
Right.
Look at that shit.
Little Napoleon couldn't have a son.
Right.
They blame it on her.
Right. Well, as with the French Empire, Napoleon controlled the Swiss Confederation, the Confederation of the Rhine, the Duchy of Warsaw, and the Kingdom of Italy. Oh. Territories allied with the French included the Kingdom of Denmark, the Kingdom of Spain under Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's elder bro.
Damn.
The Kingdom of Westphalia, Jerome Bonaparte, Napoleon's younger bro. The Kingdom of Naples under Joachim Murat, husband of Napoleon's sister Caroline.
It's all in a family affair here, huh?
The Principality of Lucca and Piombino under Elise Bonaparte, Napoleon's sister, and her husband Felice Bacciocchi. And Napoleon's former enemies, Sweden, Prussia, and Austria.
Well, we got some subsidiary wars that are going on at the same time where these wars, the Napoleonic Wars, are the direct cause of these wars in Americas and elsewhere.
Right.
We got the Serbian Revolution, which coincided with the Russo-Turkish War of 1806 to 1812. There's so many wars going on, in which the French diplomat Horace Francois Bastien Sebastiani de la Porta played a very important role in provoking the war, which were a proxy conflict of the coalition wars, having most of the time Serbs revolutionaries the support of the Russian Empire, while the Ottoman Empire was an ally of the French Empire.
Okay.
This was due to the fact that both empires feared Napoleon's moves to the east as subsequent peace of Pressburg brought France into the Balkan affairs. Jeez.
The most radicals and liberals rebels were also inspired in some way by the French Revolution. Especially
what kind of guy? Oh, especially
the rise of the nationalism and also the autonomy of the Illyrian provinces. The Serbs initially felt that French presence in the region could have developed into military aid in support of the insurrection against Ottoman rule as a sister republic. Napoleon didn't want to increase Russian or Austrian influence in the region. Okay. During this first phase from 1804 to 1806, it was a conservative reaction to new abuses by the Janissaries and the Dahis after they killed Hadi Mustafa Pasha, who was the vizier of the Sanjak of Smederevo, who created a militia of Serb notables. And then they realized that slaughter of Nizas. They realized the slaughter of the Nizas because the Janissaries expelled from Belgrade found refuge with Osman Paznavatoglu, governor of the Sanjak of Vidin in present-day Bulgaria. And they also pursued his own policy and sought independence, which brought him into conflict with the Serbs and later with the Porte after they returned from the French campaign in Egypt and Syria. Whatever all that shit, what the fuck, what that was.
Thus, the Serbs appealed to Sultan Selim III for assistance against Dahis, who had since rejected the authority of the Porte. Also, Karađorđe negotiated with the Austrian captain Sajtinsky, and at this meeting he expressed the wish of the Serbian people that the Austrian Empire receive him as a kingdom under his protection like in the past, which was the occupation of 1788 to 91. However, the Austrian authorities, due to difficulties with Napoleon and because they wanted to maintain their neutrality in order to be correct with the Porte, could not accept his offers. So the Serbs were forced to ask for the protection of the Russians when Austria did not assume that role, and therefore, May 3rd, 1804, the Serb leader sent a letter to the Russian envoy in Constantinople in which they spoke of the problems and wishes of the Serbian people, but they also stressed that they would continue to be loyal to the Sultan.
Oh, that's cool. Works out well,
I guess.
Due to recent Russo-Ottoman alliance against France's expanding influence in the Balkans, the approach of the French troops to the Turkish territories like occupation of Corfu and other Ionian islands in 1797-1799, it influenced the Porte to include an alliance with Russia in 1798. The Russian government had a neutral policy toward the Serbian revolt until summer of 1804. In which the goal was now to have in Istanbul recognize Russia as the guarantor of peace in the region. Like Russia's going to be anything of peace.
Right. In 1806, the Serbs rejected Icos peace, which the Ottomans seemed ready to grant Serbia autonomy, similar to that enjoyed by neighboring Wallachia, in order to enter into the Napoleonic Wars as an ally of the French. As the desired Russian support for their independence started a new phase of the uprising, in which the Serbs planned to create their own national state, which would also include the territories of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the Pashaliks of Vidin, Niš, Leskovac, and Pazar. Also, in the traditionalist circles of Serbia rebels, Petar I of Montenegro developed a plan in 1807 to restore the medieval Serbian Empire, consisting on unifying Podgorica, Spuz, Zabljac, the Bay of Kotar, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Dubrovnik, and Dalmatia with Montenegro, which he formed the Russian court, and was also viewed by Habsburg Serb Metropolitan Stefan Stratum Irovic.
All right.
Oh, no.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry, guys. The title of Emperor of the Serbs would be held by the Russian Emperor as Tsar, but with the condition that Russians respected the independence autocephaly of the Montenegrin Orthodox Church. Yeah, they love the Orthodox Church there in Russia. So, in February of 1807, Peter I planned an invasion of Herzegovina by Montenegrin forces and asked for Karađorđe's aid. wanting to connect. I can't even say regular words now. Wanting to connect the territory occupied by the Serbian rebel forces and Montenegro, which succeeded after the Battle of Suvodol in 1809. It's the new Tylenol that just came out. This support of Montenegro for the Serbs was reinforced due to the fact that the War of 1807 through 1812, Ottoman troops supported by French detachments on Ilaria, they attacked Montenegro along the entire border, and the Montenegrins did not have time to repel all the attacks.
Jeez, although they managed to force the French troops to withdraw from Dubrovnik and conquest the Bay of Kotor. Also, Napoleon himself offered Peter I the title of Patriarch of the entire Serbian nation or of the entire Illyricum, on the condition that he cease cooperation with Russia and accept a French protectorate, which he refused for fear of an eventual papal status, jurisdiction, or an anti-clerical policy. However, the Treaty of Tilsit between France and Russia against the Ottomans helped put a stop to hostilities in the Balkans, with a truce taking place, which was perceived extremely negatively in Serbia, despite the fact that the truce did not apply to the Serb rebels. Also, there was a secret clause that provides for the division of Turkish possessions in the Balkans between Russia and France, and the cancellation of Slaveno-Serb Empire project.
1809. Karađorđe appealed to an alliance with the Habsburgs and Napoleon, with no success. Even wrote personally to Napoleon seeking military assistance, and in 1810 dispatched an emissary to the French Empire. However, the French did not believe that the rebels had the military capacity to defeat the Ottomans or expulse from the Balkans. 1812, under pressure from Napoleon, Russia was forced to sign the Treaty of Bucharest, which restored peace with the Ottomans. One of the clauses of the treaty provided for the maintenance of Serbian autonomy. Also, a truce was signed according to the Article 8 of the treaty. That's nice.
Then the Russians encouraged Karađorđe and his followers to negotiate directly with the Porte. However, the insurgents had already achieved independence and didn't want to accept only autonomy and continued to fight. A huge Turkish army led by Grand Vizier Hursid Pasha surrounded the insurgent state from the west, south, and east. Insurgent Serbia was conquered at the end of October 1813. The experience will push the Greeks and Bulgarians to follow the Serbian example, like the Filiki Eteria in the Greek War of Independence, the Wallachian Uprising of 1821, and the National Awakening of Bulgaria. Achieving the aspirations of the Orthodox nation against Ottoman domination, wanting to liberate from the Turks all the Christian regions of the Balkans.
Of course.
Okay.
Why wouldn't they not? Jeez, all that garbage. That's whatever happened these past couple paragraphs. I don't even.
Serbians.
Right. This moves on to the War of 1812, bringing the old United States of America into this. The War of 1812 coincided with the War of the Sixth Coalition. Historians in the United States and Canada see it as a war in its own right, while Europeans often see it as a minor theater of the Napoleonic Wars. The United States declared war on Britain because of a British military support for Native Americans, interference with American merchant ships, forced enlistments of American sailors into the Royal Navy, and a desire to expand its territory. France had interfered as well, and the United States considered declaring war on France. The war ended in a military stalemate, and there were no boundary changes at the Treaty of Ghent, which took effective in early 1815 when Napoleon was on Elba.
Yeah, big nothing.
Yeah.
Apparently, we have some Latin American revolutions going on at the same time as well. The abdication of Kings Carlo IV and Fernando VII of Spain and the installation of Napoleon's brother as King Jose provoked civil wars and revolutions leading to the independence of most of Spain's mainland American colonies. In Spanish America, many local elites formed juntas and set up mechanisms to rule in the name of Ferdinand VII, whom they considered the legitimate Spanish monarch. The outbreak of the Spanish-American Wars of Independence and most of the empire was a result of Napoleon's destabilizing actions in Spain and led to the rise of strongmen in the wake of these wars.
Jeez, oh, Peters. The defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo in 1815 caused an exodus of French soldiers into Latin America, where they joined ranks with the armies of the independence movements. While these officials had a role in various victories such as the capture of Valdivia in 1820, some are held responsible for the significant defeats at the hands of the Royalists, as is the case of the Second Battle of Concha Raiada in 1818. In contrast, the Portuguese royal family escaped to Brazil and established the court there. resulting in political stability for the Portuguese America.
With the defeat of Napoleon and the return of the Braganza monarchy to Portugal, the heir remained in Brazil and declared Brazilian independence, achieving it peacefully with the territory intact. The Haitian Revolution also began in 1791, just before the French Revolutionary Wars, and continued until 1804. France's defeat resulted in the independence of Saint-Domingue and led Napoleon to sell the territory, making up the Louisiana Purchase to the United States. Right. Well, it was really just to the Barbary Wars. During the Napoleonic Wars, the United States, Sweden, and Sicily fought against the Barbary pirates in the Mediterranean. And I guess that's the end of the little proxy wars, or whatever you call it. We're focusing on the invasion of Russia, which the Treaty of Tilsit in 1807 resulted in the Anglo-Russian War, 1807 to 1812. Emperor Alexander I declared war on Britain after the British attack on Denmark in September of 1807. British men of war supported the Swedish fleet during the Finnish War and won victories over the Russians in the Gulf of Finland in July of 1808 and August of 1809. Only two. The success of the Russian army on land, however, forced Sweden to sign peace treaties with Russia in 1809 and with France in 1810 and to join the blockade against Britain. But Franco-Russian relations became progressively worse after 1810 and the Russian war with Britain effectively ended.
Sure did.
1812. In April of 1812, 100 years before the Titanic sunk, Britain, Russia, and Sweden signed secret agreements directed against Napoleon.
The central issue for both Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I was control over Poland. Each wanted a semi-independent Poland he could control. As Dale notes, implicit in the idea of a Russian Poland was, of course, a war against Napoleon. Schroeder says Poland was the root cause of Napoleon's war with Russia, but Russia's refusal to support the continental system was also a factor. 1812, at the height of its power, Napoleon invaded Russia with a pan-European Grand Army, consisting of 450,000 men, 200,000 French men, and many soldiers of allies or subject areas.
The French forces crossed the Niemen River on June 24th. You think he
forced people to fight?
Well, I'm sure he was like, hey, man, you guys are under my control, so you're fighting. The French forces crossed the Niemen River on 24th June 1812. Russia proclaimed a patriotic war, and Napoleon proclaimed a second Polish war. The Poles supplied almost 100,000 men for the invasion force, but against their expectations, Napoleon avoided any concessions to Poland, having in mind further negotiations with Russia.
Well, the Grand Army marched through Russia, winning some relatively minor engagements, and the major battle of Smolensk on the 16th through the 18th of August. In the very same days, parts of the French army, led by Marshal Nicholas Oudinot, was stopped in the Battle of Polotsk. I don't know Russia.
Or Poland.
He was stopped by the right wing of the Russian army in the Battle of Polotsk, under the command of General Peter Wittgenstein. This prevented the French march on the Russian capital, St. Petersburg. The fate of the invasion was decided in Moscow, where Napoleon led his forces into person.
Okay, Russia used scorched earth tactics and harried the Grand Army with light Cossack cavalry, whatever that is. East Slavic Orthodox Christian people. Okay.
Oh, shit.
The Grand Army did not adjust its operational methods in response. This led to most of the losses of the main column of the army, which in one case amounted to 95,000 men, including deserters, in a week. Wow.
Hey.
The main Russian army retreated for almost 3 months. This constant retreat led to the unpopularity of Field Marshal Michael Andres Barclay de Tolly, and a veteran Prince Mikhail Kutuzov was made the new commander-in-chief by Tsar Alexander I.
I mean, they had to do something, right?
Right.
That guy with that many names can't be trusted. Finally.
What is this? What did McClellan take his inspiration from this guy retreating all the time?
Right. Finally, the two armies engaged in the Battle of Borodino on the 7th of September in the vicinity of Moscow. The battle was the largest and bloodiest single-day action of the Napoleonic Wars, involving more than 250,000 men and resulting in at least 70,000 casualties.
Wow.
It was indecisive. The French, right? The French captured the main positions on the battlefield, but failed to destroy the Russian army. Logistical difficulties meant that French casualties could not be replaced, unlike the Russian ones.
Napoleon entered Moscow September 14th after the Russian army had retreated yet again. By then, the Russians had largely evacuated the city and released criminals from prisons to inconvenience the French. Wow.
Hey, that's smart, I guess.
The governor, Count Fyodor Rostopchin, ordered the city to be burnt.
Oh.
Alexander I refused to capitulate, and the peace talks attempted by Napoleon failed.
Of course it did.
In October, with no sign of clear victory in sight, Napoleon began the disastrous Great Retreat from Moscow.
Yeah, there's no way. You can't go no further into Russia. At the Battle of Maloaroslavets, the French tried to reach Kaluga, where they could find food and forage for supplies, they hoped. The replenished Russian army blocked that very road that they needed to go on, and then Napoleon was forced to retreat the same way he had come to Moscow, through the heavily ravaged areas along the Smolensk Road. In the following weeks, the Grand Army was dealt a catastrophic blow by the onset of the Russian winter. The lack of supplies and constant guerrilla warfare by Russian peasants and irregular troops as well just made hell on these guys.
Wow.
Frenchmen don't like that.
No, when the remnants of Napoleon's army crossed the Berezina River in November, only 27,000 fit soldiers survived.
Oh, my.
With 380,000 men dead or missing.
Holy shit.
And 100,000 captured.
What?
Napoleon then left his men and returned to Paris to prepare the defense against advancing Russians.
Better do something.
The campaign effectively ended on December 14th, 1812, when the last enemy troops left Russia. The Russians had lost around 210,000 men.
Damn.
But with their shorter supply lines, they soon replenished their armies. For every 12 soldiers of the Grand Army that entered Russia, only 2 would make it out in fighting condition.
Damn.
Jeez, dude.
That's a defeat there. Holy
80%
shit.
are gone.
That is cray-cray. Damn. Moving on to the War of the Sixth Coalition between 1812 and 1814. Seeing an opportunity in Napoleon's historic defeat, Prussia, Sweden, Austria, and
Yeah, they're all like, ooh,
Right.
about time.
Yeah, and several other German states switched sides, joining Russia. The United Kingdom and others opposing Napoleon. They're like, all right, we got to get with these guys.
Yep.
Napoleon vowed that he would create a new army as large as the one he had sent into Russia. Yeah, look what happened to those guys. And he quickly built up his forces in the east from 30 to 130,000, eventually to 400,000. Napoleon inflicted 40,000 casualties on the Allies at Lutzen on the 2nd of May, 1813, and at Bautzen on the 20 to 21st of May in 1813.
Wow. Both battles involved forces over 250,000 people, or soldiers, armies, whatever, making them some of the largest conflicts of the war so far. Ever, probably. Right. Metternich in November 1813 offered Napoleon the Frankfurt proposals. That would allow Napoleon to remain emperor, but France would be reduced to its natural frontiers and lose control of most of Italy and Germany and the Netherlands.
Yeah, as they should.
Napoleon still expected to win the wars and rejected the terms. So should have took it right there, Napoleon.
Yeah.
By 1814, as the Allies were closing in on Paris, Napoleon did agree to the Frankfurt proposals, but was too late, and he rejected the new harsher terms proposed by the Allies. They're like, no, dude, now this is going to, they probably demanded him not to give up being emperor and everything.
Yeah. You get nothing. We'll give you Paris.
Good day, sir.
In the Peninsular War, Arthur Wellesley, the first Duke of Wellington, he renewed the Anglo-Portuguese advance into Spain just after New Year's in 1812, besieging and capturing the fortified towns of Ciudad Rodrigo, Badajoz, and in the Battle of Salamanca, which was a damaging defeat of the French, besieging and capturing the fortified towns of Ciudad Rodrigo, Badajoz, and in the Battle of Salamanca. What's that mean? And in the Battle of Salamanca.
That was the Anglo-Portuguese advance into Spain.
Oh, the battle. Yeah, okay.
Right.
As the French regrouped, the Anglo-Portuguese entered Madrid and advanced towards Burgos before retreating all the way to Portugal when renewed. Damn, they got all the way to Madrid? That's across the old ocean.
But they're in Spain.
Yeah, Portugal's in South America.
No.
What's in
Portugal?
Oh, I was thinking
right
of
next to Spain.
Right, I was thinking of
Brazil, because
Brazil.
they speak Portuguese.
Right. And then what's the one next to it? Chile.
Yeah,
Chile.
Retreat to Portugal. They go across the ocean.
As the French regrouped, the Anglo-Portuguese entered Madrid, advanced towards Burgos, before retreating all the way to Portugal when the renewed French concentrations threatened to trap them. As a consequence of the Salamanca campaign, the French were forced to end their long siege of Cadiz and to permanently evacuate the provinces of Andalusia and Asturias.
In a strategic move, Wellesley planned to move his supply base from Lisbon to Santander. The Anglo-Portuguese forces swept northwards in late May and seized Burgos. June 21st at Vitoria, the combined Anglo-Portuguese and Spanish armies won against Joseph Bonaparte, finally breaking the French power in Spain. The French had to retreat from the Iberian Peninsula over the Pyrenees, and the belligerents declared an armistice from June 4th, 1813, continuing to August 13th, which during that time both sides attempted to recover from the loss of approximately 250,000 men in the preceding next 2 months.
Oh, shit. During this time, coalition negotiations finally brought Austria out in open opposition to France. Two principal Austrian armies took the field, adding 300,000 men to the coalition armies in Germany. The Allies now had around 800,000 frontline soldiers in the German theater, with a strategic reserve of 350,000 formed to support the frontline operation. Damn.
Wow.
We need so many people.
Well, clearly. Napoleon succeeded in bringing the imperial forces in the region to around 650,000, although only 250,000 came under his direct command, with another 120,000 under Nicholas Charles Oudinot, and 30,000 under Devout. The remainder of the imperial forces came mostly from the Confederation of the Rhine, especially Saxony and Bavaria. In addition to the south, Murat's kingdom of Naples and Eugene de Beauharnais' kingdom of Italy had 100,000 armed men. In Spain, another 150 to 200,000 French troops steadily retreated before Anglo-Portuguese forces numbering around only 100,000. Wow.
That's great. Thus, around 900,000 Frenchmen in all theaters faced around 1,800,000 coalition soldiers, including the strategic reserve under formation in Germany. The gross figures may mislead slightly, as most of the German troops fighting on the side of the French fought at best unreliably and stood on the verge of defecting to the Allies, so they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They could have easily switched sides, and that's not very cool. One can reasonably say that Napoleon could count on no more than 450,000 men in Germany, which left him outnumbered about 4-1. I mean, he's used to that, though.
Right. Following the end of the armistice, Napoleon seemed to have regained the initiative at Dresden on August 1813, where he once again defeated a numerically superior coalition army and inflicted enormous casualties while sustaining relatively few. The failures of his marshals and a slow resumption of the offensive on his part cost him any advantage that his victory might have secured. At the Battle of Leipzig in Saxony on 16th to the 19th of October, also called the Battle of the Nations, 191,000 French fought more than 300,000 allies, and the defeated French had to retreat into France.
Uh-oh.
After the French withdrawal from Germany, Napoleon's remaining ally, Denmark-Norway, became isolated and fell to the coalition.
Oh, I bet it did.
Damn, dude. Bye-bye, Napoleon.
Yeah, it's going down. Napoleon then fought a series of battles in France, including the Battle of Arcis-sur-Aube.
See, now all these people are like, dude,
right.
Now the battle's in France, dude.
Right.
What are you, stupid?
But the overwhelming numbers of the Allies steadily forced him back. The Allies entered Paris on the 30th of March, 1814. During this time, Napoleon fought his 6 days campaign, in which he won many battles against the enemy forces advancing towards Paris. During this entire campaign, he never managed to field more than 70,000 men against more than 500,000 coalition soldiers.
Oh, my.
At the Treaty of Chaumont, on 9th of March, 1814, the Allies agreed to preserve the coalition until Napoleon's total defeat. Oh, shit. They're like, no, we're not backing down.
No, we got him now.
This dude is done.
Napoleon determined to fight on, even now incapable of fathoming his fall from power. He's like, I ain't done yet. During the campaign, he had issued a decree for 90,000 fresh conscripts.
Yeah, good luck.
But only a fraction of these materialized, and Napoleon's schemes for victory eventually gave way to the reality of his hopeless situation.
He had to know.
Napoleon abdicated on April 6th, 1814. Occasional military actions continued in Italy, Spain, and Holland in early... Was that 1813 then? An armistice was signed with the Allied powers 23rd of April, 1814, and the first Treaty of Paris, signed on 30th of May, 1814, officially ended the War of the Six Coalition.
No shit.
The victors exiled Napoleon to the island of Elba and restored the French Bourbon monarchy in the person of Louis XVI. They signed the Treaty of Fontainebleau on April 11th, 1814, and initiated...
He's lucky he's still alive.
Right. And initiated the Congress of Vienna to withdraw... or to redraw the map of Europe. Damn. So.
Oh shit.
Yeah. People like him used to get killed back in the day. Now they just exiled.
Take you off to an island.
Right.
Full of women.
Ooh, I get to go to a tropical island?
Right. Moving on to the 7th coalition.
Is Elba a tropical island?
It has to be. Not tropical. Island on the Mediterranean.
Tuscany, Italy, though. I bet it's fucking beautiful. Third largest island in Italy after Sicily and Sardinia. Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't even look like it's populated, though.
It's the largest remaining stretch of land from the ancient tract that once connected the Italian peninsula to Corsica.
The 7th coalition pitted Britain, Russia, Prussia, Sweden, Switzerland, Austria, the Netherlands, and several smaller German states against France again. The period known as the 100 Days began after Napoleon escaped from Elba and landed at Cannes on the 1st of March, 1815, traveling to Paris, picking up support as he went. He eventually overthrew the restored Louis the 18th.
Oh, I said 16th earlier. Sorry, guys.
The Allies rapidly gathered their armies to meet him once again.
They're like, dude, seriously?
Napoleon only raised 280,000 men, whom he distributed among several armies.
Well, to add to
this dude's just moving quick.
I know. To add to the 90,000 strong standing army, he recalled well over 250,000 veterans from past campaigns and issued a decree for the eventual draft.
I can't believe they would even still fight for him.
Why not? It's France, man. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he issued a decree for the eventual draft of around 2.5 million new men into the French army, which was never achieved, clearly. This faced an initial coalition force of about 700,000, although coalition campaign plans provided for 1 million frontline soldiers supported by around 200,000 garrison, logistics, and other auxiliary personnel.
Jeez. Napoleon took about 124,000 men of the Army of the North on a preemptive strike against the Allies in Belgium. He intended to attack the coalition armies before they combined, in hope of driving the British into the sea and the Prussians out of the war. His march to the frontier achieved the surprise he had planned, catching the Anglo-Dutch army in a dispersed arrangement. The Prussians had been more wary, concentrating 75% of their army in and around Ligny. The Prussians forced the Armée du Nord to fight all the day of the 15th to reach Ligny in a delaying action by the Prussian First Corps. Dang, dude, just some tired mofos.
Well, Napoleon then forced Prussia to fight at Ligny on June 16, 1815, and the defeated Prussians retreated in disorder.
Wow. Disorder!
On the same day, the left wing of the Army of the North, under the command of Marshal Michel Ney, or Michel Ney, succeeded in stopping any of the Wellington's forces going to aid Blücher's Prussians by fighting a blocking action at Quatre Bras. 4 Bras, baby. Ney failed to clear the crossroads, and Wellington reinforced the position.
I bet.
But with the Prussian retreat, Wellington too had to retreat.
You damn right.
He fell back to a previously reconnoitered position on an escarpment at Mont Saint Jean, a few miles south of the village of Waterloo. Ooh, Waterloo. That's where it all ends.
Poor guys.
Good. Sleep slope.
Oh,
isn't that an embankment or anything? Right?
It's an escarpment.
Escarpment.
Wow. Napoleon took the reserve army of the North and reunited his forces with those of Ney to pursue Wellington's army. After he ordered Marshal Grouchy to take the right wing of the Army of the North and stop the Prussians regrouping. In the first of the series of the miscalculations, both Grouchy and Napoleon failed to realize that the Prussian forces were already reorganized and were reassembling at the village of Wavre.
Wavre. Wavre.
Right, Wavre. I bet.
Wavre, maybe.
The French army did nothing to stop a rather leisurely retreat that took place throughout the night and into the oily mornings and by the Prussians. Of course they didn't.
As the 4th, 1st, and 2nd Russian Corps, why don't they just say 1st, 2nd, and 4th?
Right.
Marched through the town towards Waterloo. The 3rd Prussian Corps took up blocking positions across the river. And although Grouchy engaged and defeated the Prussian rearguard under the command of Lieutenant General von Thielmann, in the Battle of Wavre, it was 12 hours too late. In the end, 17,000 Prussians had kept 33,000 badly needed French reinforcements off the field.
Dang. All right. Look at the Prussians. Napoleon delayed the start of the fighting at the Battle of Waterloo on the morning of 18th of June, 1815, for several hours while he waited for the ground to dry after the previous night's rain. Screw that. By late afternoon, the French army had not succeeded in driving Wellington's forces from the escarpment on which they stood. When the Prussians arrived and attacked the French right flank in ever-increasingly numbers, Napoleon's strategy of keeping the coalition armies divided had failed, And the combined coalition general advance drove his army from the field in confusion. They're like, oh, shit. Confused.
Grouchy organizes...
Or like running around in circles.
They're like, what do we do? Grouchy organized a successful and well-ordered retreat towards Paris, where Marshal Devout had 117,000 men ready to turn back the 116,000 men of Blucher and Wellington. General Van Dam, was defeated at the Battle of Issy, and negotiations for surrender had begun.
On arriving at Paris 3 days after Waterloo, Napoleon still clung to the hope of concerted national resistance, but the temper of the legislative chambers and of the general public did not favor his view. He's like, dude, they're like, guys, it's been like 6 years. More than that.
Right. Like we were behind you when you first escaped.
16 years.
And came gallantly marching into town again.
Right.
And then,
oh, shit, look at you, bud.
and then this happens. Right. You got to go, dude.
Lacking support, Napoleon abdicated again on the 22nd of June, 1815. And on 15th of July, he surrendered to the British squadron at Rochefort. You think they'll kill him this time? How many times did you try to take over the world before you... Jeez.
What are we going to do today, France?
The Allies exiled him to the remote South Atlantic island of St. Helena, where he died on the 5th of May, 1821.
6 years, damn. Remote?
Oh, shit.
That's pretty remote.
Dude, you got to go out in the middle. Hopefully the hurricanes get you. Jeez. Yeah, he ain't escaping that island. I mean, why would you put him in the Elba anyway, right off the coast of Italy?
I know, what a bunch of idiots, dude. Stupids. How many people were there? Notable people.
Nobody knows. What, the island?
Jonathan, a Seychelles giant tortoise brought to St. Helena in 1882, is the world's oldest known living land animal. Celebrated his 190th birthday in 2022.
Yeah, still alive.
That guy. Oh, he'll be alive for about 100, 200 more years.
Yeah, they will never die.
Oh. It's crazy.
Yeah.
In Italy, Joachim Murat, whom the Allies had allowed to remain king of Naples after Napoleon's initial defeat, once again allied with his brother-in-law, triggering... What the hell? They let his brother-in-law stay? Hey. Triggering the Neapolitan War.
Oh, shit.
Jeez. March to May 1815. Hoping to find support among Italian nationalists, fearing the increasing influence of the Habsburgs in Italy, Murat issued the Rimini Proclamation and incited them to war. The proclamation failed, and the Austrians soon crushed Murat at the Battle of Tolentino, May 2nd through the 3rd, 1815, forcing him to flee.
Oh.
Once again, the Bourbons returned to the throne of Naples on the 20th of May, 1815.
It's just a smorgasbord of people over there.
Yeah.
Murat tried to regain his throne.
Just give up, guys.
But after that failed, he was executed by firing squad on 13th of October in 1815. Should have done that a long time ago.
You're no Napoleon, okay?
Right. Yeah.
We gave him a pass because he was actual...
He's like, don't worry, if I lose, they'll just exile me to an island. No, we're going to exile you to the ground. The Second Treaty of Paris, signed on the 20th of November, 1815, officially marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Political effects of Napoleonic Wars brought radical changes to Europe, but the reactionary forces returned and they restored the Bourbon House to the French throne. Napoleon succeeded in bringing most of Western Europe under one rule.
He did.
In most European countries, subjugation in the French Empire brought it with many liberal features of the French Revolution, including democracy, due process in courts, abolition of serfdom, and a reduction of the... Look, it took America 60 more years. The reduction of power of the Catholic Church. Oh, good for you guys. And demand for constitutional limits on monarchs.
Well, that's a one, huh? Never came to fruition.
Right.
The increasing voice of the middle classes with rising commerce and industry meant that restored European monarchs found it difficult to restore pre-revolutionary absolutism and had to retain many of the reforms enacted during Napoleon's rule. Right. Like, all these people got used to living under what Napoleon let them do, and they're like, we can't be treating these people like peasants no more.
Right.
And, all right. Institutional legacies remain to this day in the form of civil law with clearly defined codes of law and enduring legacy of the Napoleonic Code.
I mean, I guess he kind of was somewhat of a... some kind of good stuff, right? France's constant warfare with combined forces of different combinations of, and eventually all of the other major powers of Europe for over 2 decades finally took its toll. They're like, dude, we're sick of fighting everybody in the world.
Right.
By the end of Napoleonic Wars, France no longer held the role of the dominant power in continental Europe. as it had since the times of Louis XIV, as the Congress of Vienna produced a balance of power by resizing the main powers so they could balance each other out and remain at peace. In this regard, Prussia was restored in its former borders and also received large chunks of Poland and Saxony. Poland's like, what the fuck?
Why? Greatly enlarged, Prussia became a permanent great power. In order to drag Prussia's attention towards the West and France, Congress also gave the Rhineland and Westphalia to Prussia. These industrial regions transformed agrarian Prussia into an industrial leader in the 19th century. Britain emerged as the most important economic power, and its Royal Navy held unquestioned naval superiority across the globe well into the 20th century.
Of course they did. After the Napoleonic period, nationalism, a relatively new movement, became increasingly significant. This shaped much of the course of the future European history. Its growth spelled the beginning of some states and the end of others, as the map of Europe changed dramatically in hundreds of years following the Napoleonic era. Rule by fiefdoms and aristocracy was widely replaced by national ideologies based on shared origins and culture.
Right.
Napoleon's reign over Europe sowed the seeds for the founding of the nation-states of Germany and Italy by starting the process of consolidating city-states, kingdoms, and principalities.
At the end of the war, Denmark was forced to cede Norway to Sweden, mainly as compensation for the loss of Finland, which the other coalition members agreed to. But because Norway had signed its own constitution on 17th May 1814, Sweden initiated the Swedish-Norwegian War of 1814.
Oh, shit.
The war was a short one, taking place between 26th of July to 18th of August 1814, and was a Swedish victory that put Norway into a personal union with Sweden under Charles
after Norway
14th.
just got their own constitution, they're thinking things are going to be great.
No more.
Now they're done.
And Sweden ruled them. The union
There's
was...
not even a Norway anymore, is there?
Of course there is.
You sure?
Yes.
Norwegian?
Yes.
I thought this was like Scandinavian.
No, the whole area is Scandinavia. But Norway still exists, man. The Union was peacefully dissolved in 1905, and the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, created as a buffer state against France, dissolved rapidly with the independence of Belgium in 1830.
Oh, nice. Napoleonic Wars also played a key role in the independence of Latin America colonies from Spain and Portugal. Mm-hmm. The conflict weakened the authority and military power of Spain, especially after the Battle of Trafalgar. There were many uprisings in Spanish America leading to the Wars of Independence. In Portuguese America, Brazil experienced greater autonomy as it now served as a seat of the Portuguese Empire. And it ascended politically to the status of kingdom.
Hey.
These events also contributed to the Portuguese Liberal Revolution in 1820 and the independence of Brazil in the year of 1820 Tizzle.
Century of relative transatlantic peace after the Congress of Vienna enabled the greatest intercontinental migration in human history, beginning with a big spurt of immigration after the release of the dam erected by the Napoleonic Wars.
Oh.
Immigration inflows relative to the U.S. population rose to record levels, peaking at 1.6% in 1850 to 51, as 30 million Europeans relocated to the United States between 1815 and 1914.
Look at you guys.
Sure did.
You bunch of prudes. Another concept emerged from the Congress of Vente.
Sausages.
Sausages.
Vente sausages.
20 sausages. Another concept emerged from the Congress of Vienna.
Sausages.
That of a unified Europe. After his defeat, Napoleon deplored the fact that his dream of a free and peaceful European association remained unaccomplished. What do you mean? You weren't trying to do that. I guess he was. He was trying to get rid of the monarchy.
Right.
Such a European association would share the same principles of a government, system of measurement, currency, and civil code. 1.5 centuries later, and after 2 world wars, several of these ideals reemerged in the form of the European Union. That's bullshit. And they made Napoleon die on an island in the middle of the frickin' Atlantic.
Until the time of Napoleon, European states employed relatively small armies made up both national soldiers and mercenaries. Okay.
Right.
These regulars were highly drilled professional soldiers.
Right.
The Ancien regime armies could only deploy small field armies due to the rudimentary staffs and comprehensive yet cumbersome logistics.
Fantastic.
Both issues combined to limit field forces to approximately 30,000 men under a single commander.
Oh.
Military innovators in the mid-18th century began to recognize the potential of an entire nation at war, a nation in arms.
Oh. Okay.
Right. Instead of having your own little village things, you're having a whole national army.
Right. The scale of warfare dramatically enlarged during the Revolutionary and subsequent Napoleonic Wars.
I'd say so.
During Europe's major pre-revolutionary war, the 7 Years' War of 1756 to 1763, few armies ever numbered more than 200,000, with field forces often numbering less than 30,000. The French innovations of separate corps, allowing a single commander to efficiently command more than the traditional command span of 30,000 men. And living off the land.
I got the commands, man. I got the commands, man. I got the commander of the span.
There's too many commanders in the Spaniards.
The Spaniards got too many commanders.
And they lived off the land, which allowed field armies to deploy more men without requiring an equal increase in supply arrangements, such as depots and supply drains. Oh, that's good for you.
Oh, nice.
And this also allowed the French Republic to field much larger armies than their opponents.
Yeah, and Napoleon ensured during the time of the French Republic that separate French field armies operated as a single army under his control, often allowing them substantially outnumber his opponent.
Right.
This forces continental opponents to also increase the size of their armies, clearly, moving away from the traditional small, well-drilled ancien regime armies of the 18th century to mass conscript armies.
Just huge mofos.
Yep.
You guys thought the Battle of Gettysburg was huge. Oh, my.
The Battle of Gettysburg wasn't even ranked top 50 in these wars.
No, it's crazy. The Battle of Marengo, which largely ended the War of the Second Coalition, was fought with fewer than 60,000 men on both sides. The Battle of Austerlitz, which ended the War of the Third Coalition, involved fewer than 160,000 men. The Battle of Friedland, which led to peace with Russia in 1807, involved about 150,000 men. After these defeats, the Continental Powers developed various forms of mass conscription to allow them to face France on even terms. And the size of field armies increased rapidly. The Battle of Wagram of 1809 involved 300,000 men, and 500,000 fought at Leipzig in 1813, of whom 150,000 were moited or wounded. Damn.
About 1 million French soldiers became casualties, wounded, invalided, or killed, a higher proportion than in the First World War. The European total may have reached 5 million military deaths.
Holy shit.
Including disease.
Whoa.
French had still not even more deaths than what was in the World War II.
I know.
French had the second largest population in Europe by the end of the 18th century, which was 28 million, as compared to Britain's 12 and Russia's 35 to 40. Russia's always been just massive, dude.
Right.
It was well poised to take advantage of the levée en masse. What does that mean? A French term used for policy of mass national conscription. Okay.
Right. They had more people.
Right. Before Napoleon's efforts, Lazare Carnot played a large part in the reorganization of, you can tell British people or whoever wrote this because everything is spelled with an S instead of a Z.
Right.
He led the reorganization of the French army from 1793 to 94, a time which saw previous French misfortunes reversed, with Republican armies advancing on all fronts.
Fang.
Fang.
The French army peaked in size in 1790s with 1.5 million Frenchmen enlisted, although battlefield strength was much less. Haphazard bookkeeping, rudimentary medical support, and lax recruitment standards ensured that many soldiers either never existed, fell ill, or were unable to withstand the physical demands of soldiering. Whatever. About 2.8 million Frenchmen fought on land and about 150,000 at sea, bringing the total for France to almost 3 million combatants during almost 25 years of war.
Jeez. Well, Britain had 750,000 men under arms between 92 and 1815, as its army expanded from 40,000 men in 1793. Jeez. To a peak of 250,000 men in 1813.
Not very much.
Over 250,000 sailors served in the Royal Navy.
Oh, damn.
In September 1812, Russia had 900,000 enlisted
Holy.
men in its land forces, and between 1799 and 1850, 2.1 million men served in its army.
Damn.
Another 200,000 served in the Russian Navy. Out of the 900,000 men, the field armies deployed against France numbered less than 250,000, though.
That's crazy.
Well, reserve.
Right. There are no consistent statistics for other major combatants. Austria's forces peaked at about 576,000 during War of the Sixth Coalition. Had little or no naval component, yet never fielded more than 250,000 men in the field armies. After Britain, Austria proved the most persistent enemy of France. More than 1 million Austrians served during the long wars. Its large army was overall quite homogeneous and solid, and in 1813 operated in Germany, which was 140,000 men, Italy, and the Balkans, which had 90,000 men at its peak, about 50,000 men during most of the campaigning on these fronts, though. Austria's manpower was becoming quite limited towards the end of the wars, though, leading its generals to favor cautious and conservative strategies to limit their very own losses.
Prussia never had more than 320,000 men under arms at any time. 1813 to 1850, the core of its army, about 100,000 men, was characterized by competence and determination, but the bulk of its forces consisted of second and third line troops as well as militiamen of variable strength.
No shit.
Many of these troops performed reasonably well and often displayed considerable bravery, but lacked the professionalism of their regular counterparts and were not as well equipped.
Oh.
Others were largely unfit for operations, except sieges. They're like, we can sit around.
Right.
During the 1813 campaign, 130,000 men were used in the military operations, with 100,000 of them effectively participating in the main German campaign. About 30,000 being used to besiege the isolated French garrisons.
Wow. Spain's armies also peaked at around 200,000 men, not including more than 50,000 guerrillas scattered over Spain. In addition, the Maratha Confederation, the Ottoman Empire, Italy, Naples, and the Duchy of Warsaw each had more than 100,000 men under its arms. Even small nations now had armies rivaling the size of the great powers' forces of past wars, but most of these were poor quality forces only suitable for garrison duties. The size of their combat forces remained modest, yet they could still provide a welcome addition to the major powers. Look at that. We get you a welcome.
Mm-hmm. Well, the percentage of French troops in the Grand Army, which Napoleon led into Russia, was about 50%, while the French allies also provided a significant contribution to the French forces in Spain.
Oh.
As these small nations joined the coalition forces in 1813 to 14, they provided a useful addition to the coalition while depriving Napoleon of much-needed manpower.
You ain't kidding. It just wasn't working out for the poor guy. The initial stages of the Industrial Revolution had much to do with larger military forces. It became easy to mass-produce weapons and thus to equip larger forces. Britain was the largest single manufacturer of armaments in this very period. It supplied most of the weapons used by the coalition powers throughout the conflicts. France produced the second largest total of armaments, equipping its own huge forces as well as those of the Confederation of Rhine and other allies. Napoleon showed innovative tendencies in his use of mobility to offset numerical disadvantages, as demonstrated in the rout of the Austro-Russian forces in 1805 in the Battle of Austerlitz.
Well, the French army redefined the role of artillery, forming independent mobile units as opposed to the previous tradition of attaching artillery pieces in support of troops.
Right.
The semaphore system had allowed the French war minister Carnot to communicate with French forces on the frontiers throughout the 1790s.
Okay.
What was that? Oh, damn.
Telegraph system. Oh, shit.
Well, it's like a signal system. Like,
right.
They would do these little things and whatever it meant, right? Yeah. Conveys information according to the direction of the indicator's point, and the shutter telegraph, which uses panels that can be rotated to block or pass the light from the sky. Oh. So they were like shining lights and shit.
Right. That's fantastic.
This shit.
Fantastic.
The French continued to use the system throughout the Napoleonic Wars. Aerial surveillance was used for the first time when the French used a hot air balloon to survey coalition positions before the Battle of Flores on June 26, 1794.
Look at these guys. Good for you.
I mean, not very stealthy, but...
No, everybody's going to see that. Historians have explored how the Napoleonic Wars became total wars. Mm-hmm. Most historians argue that the escalation in size and scope came from two sources. First was the ideological clash between revolutionary, egalitarian, conservative, and hierarchical belief systems. Second was the emergence of nationalism in France, Germany, Spain, and elsewhere that made these people's wars.
Introducing the People's Wars.
Instead of contest between monarchs.
Right.
So. Bell has argued.
Right. Instead of just monarch versus monarch, now it's country versus country, pretty much. Right.
Bell has argued that even more important than ideology and nationalism were the intellectual transformations in the culture of war that came about through the Age of Enlightenment.
Right. One factor, he says, is that war was no longer a routine event, but a transforming experience for societies. A total experience.
Yes.
Secondly, the military emerged in its own right as a separate sphere of society distinct from the ordinary civilian world.
Right.
Right, because back then everybody was taking up arms and
They could wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Time to go, Fred.
Time to go. All right. Well, the French Revolution made every civilian a part of the war machine, either as a soldier through universal conscription or as a vital cog in the home front machinery supporting and supplying the army.
Okay.
Out of that, says Bell, came militarism. The belief that the military role was morally superior to the civilian role in times of great national crisis.
I mean, yeah. The fighting army represented the essence of the nation's soul. As Napoleon proclaimed, it is the soldier who founds a republic, and it is a soldier who maintains it. Napoleon said on his career, I closed the gulf of anarchy and brought order out of chaos. I rewarded merit regardless of birth or wealth, wherever I found it. I abolished feudalism and restored equality to all religion and before the law. I fought the decrepit monarchies of the old regime because the alternative was the destruction of all of this. I purified the revolution. Good for you, bud.
Well, intelligence also played a pivotal factor throughout the Napoleonic Wars and could very well have changed the tide of the war. The use and misuse of military intelligence dictated the course of many major battles during the wars. Some of the major battles that were dictated by the use of intelligence include Waterloo, Leipzig, Salamanca, and Vittoria. Major exception to the greater use of superior military intelligence to claim victory was the Battle of Jena in 1806.
Oh, ain't that fantastic? At the Battle of Jena, even Prussian superior military intelligence was not enough to counter the sheer military force of Napoleon's armies. The use of intelligence...
What kind of intelligence did you gather? Hey, they got like 300,000 men.
Right. The use of intelligence varied greatly across the major world powers of war. Napoleon at this time had more supply of intelligence given to him than any French general before. However, Napoleon was not an advocate of military intelligence at this time, as he often found it unreliable and inaccurate when compared to his own preconceived notions of the enemy. Like, that's not what I think.
Right.
Do they have horses over there?
Of course they did.
Never know.
Horses aren't. Horses were brought to America. Yes. Yes. Or yeah, 'cause Indians didn't have horses before we came. It's true. Right?
I don't know.
Yeah, 1400s. Yep. Spanish conquistadors brought European horses. It's widely covered with open grassland. Yeah, see, they were riding like donkeys and shit. Maybe.
Maybe.
Anywho, Napoleon rather studied his enemy via domestic newspapers, diplomatic publications, maps, and prior documents of military engagements in the theaters of war of which he would operate.
Fantastic.
Well, this is what they did last time, so...
Right. Well, you're going to do the same.
All right. It was this stout and constant study of the enemy which made Napoleon the military mastermind of his time.
Right.
Whereas his opponents, Britain, Austria, Prussia, Russia, were much more reliant on traditional intelligence gathering methods and were much more quickly and willing to act on them.
Right.
It's like in baseball. People don't use the sabermetrics now.
Right.
Still got the old school ways.
Yeah, you gotta love it. The methods of intelligence during these wars were to include the formation of vast and complex networks of corresponding agents, code breaking, and cryptanalysts. The greatest cipher to be used to hide military operations during this time was known as the Great Paris Cipher, used by the French. However, thanks to the hard work of British codebreakers like George Scoville, the British were...
Is it the inventor of the Scoville units?
Maybe. The British were able to crack French ciphers and gain vast amounts of military intelligence on Napoleon and his armies.
All right. My friends, we come to an end.
So is Napoleon a bad guy?
I don't know.
Was he a good guy?
He wanted to get rid of all the
monarchy and the kingdoms and shit. A dictator?
Expressed freedom of speech in the press, not willing to allow any opposition to his rule. That's true. Napoleon overreached his empire building, leading to death, defeat, bankruptcy for the French people. He even tried to regain power after exile. That doesn't make him bad.
Right.
Was Napoleon the bad guy?
What was his mission?
In Britain, he is seen as a villain, mainly remembered for overthrowing the government for war. Of course he would be. Was Napoleon a bad guy in the context of human history? Napoleon was certainly no good guy. He was an emperor and a very pragmatic politician. He was an excellent general. Exceptional military commander.
No, he just want to get rid of the monarchies. So I don't know, man. He didn't mass murder people, right?
Yeah, he was evil because he betrayed the best ideals of the revolution and tried to restore people to the legal status of property. He's bad to the world in the sense of history because he was going against Britain.
Right. You can't go against Britain.
I don't know.
Leader or tyrant?
Both.
Yeah.
I guess, right?
Sure.
There you go. That's the Napoleonic Wars. 2 hours long. I thought it was going to be more than that, but we frickin' did it. Hopefully we get an article coming up next that's not 100,000 words, which we'll take a look at right now. What we gonna do next? Spin the categories. It's gonna be life.
It'll be like video games.
What's under the categories of life? Could be good ones, right? Cat, dog.
Cat dog.
Alone in the world with a little cat dog.
Little cat dog.
Spin it.
All right.
I have a feeling it's going to be the coronavirus.
Oh, better not. It's going to be cattle.
Oh, it's going to be a dodo bird.
Oh, dodo bird. The dodo.
A dodo.
All right.
Woo!
A doo-doo.
Woo!
Wow. The raccoon. The octopussy. So the dodo. What's the dodo look like?
The dodo for animal people.
There's no Wikipedia page for dodo. There it is.
It's Raphis cuculitis.
Oh, no. I can't have so much words on the dodo. That's not that bad.
It's not that bad. Yeah, the dodo.
It's going to be about an hour long, though.
Probably. It's an extinct flightless bird that was endemic to the island of Mauritius.
3 feet and 3 inches tall.
East of Madagascar.
Damn, that's a big old boy.
Holy shit. Remains show the dodo was about 3.3 and may have weighed 23 to 39 pounds. That's it. The dodo's appearance in life is evidenced only by drawings, paintings, and written accounts.
What? So there's no bones or anything? So how do they know if it's real?
Subfossil remains. So it's still in the dirt, I guess? Like the imprints of them, maybe?
Mm-hmm. I don't know about that. I'm going to call bullshit on dodo.
Well, I guess we'll see. Oh, there's bones.
It's skull.
Examination of which led the dodo to being classified as a pigeon in 1842.
It's a pigeon. It's a big pigeon.
That's a big-ass pigeon.
Where is it from?
Madagascar.
Oh, makes sense.
Madagascar.
A little island off Africa.
Yeah. The Nicobar pigeon is the closest living relative of the dodo.
What's that look like? Oh,
That's right there.
That's tiny.
That is a cute-ass pigeon.
Oh, look at you stupid pigeon. And you make a pepperoni. Look at the dodo.
A dodo would...
A hen.
Oh, why does a hen look like that?
Right.
It's an ugly-ass bird.
Yeah.
That's why you call somebody a dodo. They're retarded because they look retarded.
Dodo.
All right, that'll be next week's episode on the dodo bird.
The dodo bird, huh?
French Revolution. I mean,
It's a smaller, it's like a emu. Emu's about 3 feet tall.
Not even close to an emu.
Emu's like 3 feet tall.
Emu's pretty much the size of an ostrich.
Ostrich?
Taller than you.
Yeah, an emu.
Yes.
Never seen emu to emu?
You ever been at the zoo?
An emu?
They have plenty of them.
They have emus?
Yes. Yeah. That's the Napoleonic Wars. Go check out our other show, Outlaws and Gunslingers. We're in the middle of the mafia. Wrapping up the Genovese crime family. Also, if you are listening to this and you're a fan of wars and battles and all that good stuff, we have Battles of the American Civil War that we do over on the Bang Dang Network, where we're currently in the middle of 1863 over there. And don't forget to sub and like and all that stuff on YouTube at Bang Dang Network. And also, if you're listening on podcasts, leave those reviews and comment. Do all that stuff for us so we can get that algorithm up there. And we'll see you next week for the dodo bird here on According to Wikipedia. We are the month of Michigan. Bang Dang.